around Ocala.
Plus, of course, a splash of sports as well.
Now, here's your host, Tom.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Ocala Talks on a Wednesday. You know, the 20th anniversary of 9/11 is this Saturday. And a lot has changed in our country since then. And on the eve of this 20th anniversary, a new middle grades novel that confronts racial discrimination and encourages tolerance and understanding is coming out. Acclaimed author Saadia Faruqi. She's going to talk about the topical novel, Yusuf Azim is Not a Hero. She joins us this morning. Saadia, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Give us a little background on this is about a Texas-born Muslim boy. So he's born and raised in Texas. He's an American who practices the Muslim religion, Yusuf, and he just wants to build robots, but he can't build robots. Give us a little overview of what's going on in this story.
Sure. Thank you for that was actually a good beginning. That's exactly what happened. So Yusuf Azim is Not a Hero is a story about a 12-year-old Muslim American boy, Yusuf. He's into robotics. He's sweet and nerdy. He just wants to make his school and his parents proud. But he's watching his small Texas town get more and more divided as the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks draw closer. There's tension. There's parades, and there's things that he just doesn't understand because he's a kid. He wasn't alive when 9/11 happened. He doesn't understand what the big deal is, like a lot of our young people today. To understand the tensions in the school and community, Yusuf starts to read a journal that his uncle wrote in 2001 as a young boy himself when the attacks occurred. So the story is actually a back and forth. There are two timelines. There's 2021. Current timeline, and there's 2001. So you see both those perspectives. And as in the story, as Yusuf learns more about what happened 20 years ago and how life changed for the Muslim American community, who were suddenly seen as being part of the enemy because of the attacks, he realizes that, things haven't really changed a lot, especially in small towns like where he's from, and he has to do something before his community is kind of split apart on this topic. So yeah, children's novel, but definitely topical for today, for every age.
Not only is this a topical novel about what was the 20th anniversary, but it also is a novel that tells you how to confront bullies, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the story has both adult and kid bullies, and one of the main takeaways that I hope people get from this book is how to be an ally, how to stand up to anybody who's, just being offensive or mean or rude or hurtful. There's some violence in the book. There's a lot of difficult things that happen to Yusuf and his Muslim community in this small Texas town. And hopefully by reading the book, people get a better idea of how it's not always, people usually just stay silent when they see something happening. They're not sure how to stand up for somebody else in a safe way. They feel that maybe that bullying will be then directed towards themselves, which is obviously can happen. So this book teaches readers how to be allies in a safe and respectful way as well.
People may have incurred from your name, Saadia Faruqi, that you are of a Middle Eastern or Pakistani, actually American descent, and so
yes.
you living here, you going through 9/11, how did it affect you, and what brought the thought process from 20 years back? How did that figure into you writing this book now?
Oh, this book has been 20 years in the making. Yes, I am Muslim American. I'm originally from Pakistan. I came to the U.S. as an immigrant in my early 20s, a couple years before 9/11. I'm a mom raising first-generation American kids in this country. I have a kid who's in high school and a daughter who's in middle school. I've seen firsthand the trauma of continued prejudice that my community has faced for the last 20 years. I've seen my kids struggle with it even though they weren't even alive when the attacks happened. And I've been an interfaith activist, which means I've been working with people in my community. Actually, I started out in Florida, where you are. I went to UCF. That's where my first home was in the U.S., although I live in Texas now. But the last 20 years have just been my mission of bringing people together and helping them understand my community better, but just understanding each other overall, talking about our similarities and focusing on how we can make our communities more welcoming and tolerant. And this book is just kind of an extension of that. So even though it's fiction, I use a lot of interviews of real people who were kids during that time, and how their lives changed and what happened to them in terms of how they started being treated by their neighbors and how we can do better. It's been 20 years and we're in some ways still not doing better. So we need to work a little bit harder, and hopefully my book can start that conversation.
You know, I'll be the first to admit, after a few months after 9/11, when I would go into airports or I would go into certain situations, I'll be the first to admit, I was racial profiling. I was looking at Middle Eastern. Am I in a safe place? I thought that, but then I started, doing a little research into what the teachings of Islam is and everything, and the peacefulness of the Quran teaches. And then I learned that from talking to friends of mine who were Muslim and all, that these were extremists. These were people who were not the vast majority of Islamist followers didn't think that what happened on 9/11 was good either. And so I was able to turn through education, turn my thought process. But what you're saying is, here we are 20 years later, and the thought process hadn't turned very much for a lot of people.
It hasn't turned for a lot of people, especially if you live in smaller communities where everyone is the same. I'm from Houston, so I know, and definitely where I was living in Orlando at that time as well. Diverse communities, you get in, you're people of different colors and backgrounds and languages and cultures and religions are all around you. So you get to know them. And when you get to know somebody, you realize they're just a human being just like you. There are bad people and there are good people. And we shouldn't be judging somebody based on what somebody else of their faith or their culture does, because that's not that person. But if you live in a place where everyone is just like you, it's really hard to get out of that comfort zone. And definitely reading books is a much better way of understanding some people if you can be, in actual touch with them. Especially young people. Young people today, it's important to learn about 9/11 because it's our history. But it's not just any history. It's an event that entire generation of people were affected by. We fought 2 wars. We changed how things were done at the airport and at ball games and in schools. We don't really address any of those things when we talk about 9/11, especially with kids. We commemorate the anniversary, we move on until next year. And then those wounds that we have in our national kind of psyche, they don't really heal because we haven't talked about it and we haven't learned anything about each other.
I heard a parent, and I'm a annual pass holder for Disney and Universal and all, because we live right here. You lived in Orlando.
Oh my gosh!
If you live here,
we did that too.
Right. So about 3 or 4 months ago, I was going to SeaWorld, and I heard a kid of about 6 or 7 years old. I don't know what his nationality was. I don't know. I couldn't tell you one way or the other. But he goes, "Why are we having to walk through these beeper things, Mom?" And the mom stopped and said, "Well, let me tell you about September 11th, 2001. And she literally pulled him to the side. And I didn't hear the whole conversation, but she started it with, "Let me explain to you September 11th, 2001. And it got me to thinking, she's right. Disney, Universal, all of them, we do things different when we go to those places now because of 9/11, but everybody's doing it different. It's not just one group of people. Everybody worldwide, anybody that comes into this country from all over the world changed on September 11th, 2001, not just the United States.
The world absolutely changed. The world absolutely changed. The problem is that some people are affected worse by those changes than others. For example, when I and my family go through the airport security line, we're always taken aside for supposedly random additional screening where no one else is. My son was 15 for the first time. He was taken aside, and his hands were swabbed, and he kept saying, "What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?" And it was heartbreaking. I had to tell him, "You didn't do anything wrong. this is another example of racial profiling where someone sees you as a threat, and so they're just going to assume that they need to check you more thoroughly than everybody else.
What do you say?
So absolutely.
What do you say to the people though to say, yeah, but it was people of Middle Eastern descent that did this, so I'm okay with that as long as it makes it much more safer for everybody to travel. What do you say to somebody with that attitude?
I mean, I do agree that it's important to be safe, and I'm the first one to, I've been living this reality for 20 years, so it's not like I've been standing up, every time I go through the airport line and start screaming at people and saying, why are you doing this? I do accept it, but I feel like things need to change in terms of, there should be more transparency in who is being chosen for these random security screenings, for example. I think that we have to have a balance in any community between safety and making sure that people's rights are protected as well. So unless we ask questions and talk about it and learn from our government officials why things are being done, it's just going to be a very unjust system. So, people like my son who are 15 years old, who are American-born, who want nothing to do except, like the Yusuf in my story, just be a normal kid, putting that burden of them, that is a huge trauma, and that's a slippery slope to be on. So we have to be careful in what we allow in the name of safety if we're hurting people in the process.
We're talking with author Saadia Faruqi. Saadia, if people want to go and find this book, where are some of the avenues they could go look for this book and find it for purchase?
It's hopefully everywhere. You can go online at your favorite online retailer, but I hope that people support their local independent bookstores because I'm a big proponent of bookstores. If you want signed copies, then the bookstore in my neighborhood, which is Bradlow's bookstore in Houston, Texas, they will have signed copies, but you just can get them. Barnes & Noble, Target, anywhere. Hopefully we'll have all of them. Or your public library should. The book just came out yesterday, so the libraries may take a few weeks to actually process them, but yes, you can borrow them if you want as well.
Well, thanks for writing a book that will try to help and explain to people under the age of 20, because people under the age of 20 have no understanding of the day the world changed, September 11th, 2001. Saadia Faruqi, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
We'll be back after this short timeout, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM. This is WOCA, The Source.
Hello, I'm Mark Sears with Regency Printing. With over 10 years in the printing business, I know you'll find Regency Printing the place for all your local printing needs. Plus, I have fax services, mailbox rentals, notary service, U.S. mail, pack and ship, all at one convenient location, 2375 Northeast 25th Avenue. Just look for the yellow signs. Regency Printing, 789-6683.